The story of Noah's Ark is often portrayed as a cheerful children's tale. But here's something that might surprise you. Archaeological evidence shows that flood narratives appear in over 200 ancient cultures worldwide, suggesting a shared historical memory of catastrophic flooding.
That's fascinating, and it really connects to how differently the biblical text presents this story. The emphasis isn't on cute animals, but on God being deeply troubled by humanity's corruption.
You know what's particularly striking in the text? It says, every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. That's not just talking about actions, but the very root of human motivation. Yet, in this darkness, we get this ray of hope with Noah.
Hmm, let's dig into that. The text describes Noah as righteous and blameless. But what exactly did that mean in practice?
Well, it's interesting because archaeological records from that era show widespread violence and corruption in early civilizations. So when it says Noah walked faithfully with God, it meant he was living radically counter to his culture, kind of like swimming upstream.
The timeline of this story is pretty mind blowing, too. 120 years of ark building, that's longer than modern construction projects like the Great Wall of China or the pyramids.
And here's something wild. Based on the biblical measurements, naval engineers have calculated the ark would have been about 510 feet long. That's longer than a football field and a half. Imagine building something that massive while everyone thinks you're crazy.
You know what really gets me? The detail about God Himself shutting the door of the ark. There's something both protective and terrifyingly final about that moment.
Right. And ancient Near Eastern texts often describe divine beings closing temple doors. So this detail would have carried huge significance for ancient readers. It's showing God personally sealing his people's protection.
The way this story parallels modern climate discussions is pretty striking. You have someone warning about impending catastrophe while others carry on business as usual.
Exactly. And Jesus actually drew that same parallel. He said people before his return would be just like Noah's time, eating, drinking, marrying, not because these things are wrong, but because they're completely oblivious to larger realities.
The text's emphasis on both justice and divine grief is particularly moving. This wasn't a casual decision, it deeply grieved God's heart.
And that grief reveals something profound about God's character. Even in judgment, his focus was on preservation. The architectural specifications he gave Noah, the exact dimensions, materials, waterproofing methods, they're remarkably similar to ancient shipbuilding techniques we've found in Mesopotamian texts.
So, what you're saying is this wasn't just about destruction, it was about ensuring survival and new beginnings?
Precisely. And recent geological studies have found evidence of massive flooding events in the ancient Near East. While scholars debate the extent of the biblical flood, these findings show how such catastrophic events shaped human history and memory.
The implications for today are pretty sobering when you think about it. This idea that there's still time to respond, but that time isn't endless.
You know what's fascinating? Studies in behavioral psychology show how humans tend to normalize gradually worsening situations. Exactly what the text describes happening before the flood. People just adjusted to increasing corruption until it became their normal.
That really changes the perspective. Instead of seeing the flood primarily as destruction, it becomes more about divine intervention to preserve life and goodness in the face of overwhelming evil.
And that brings us full circle to Noah's faith. Recent archaeological findings show no evidence of major rainfall in many ancient Near Eastern regions, meaning Noah was preparing for something he'd never experienced. That's a profound picture of what real faith looks like.